The Wind in the Willows. Chapter 4. Mr. Badger. Please like, share, and subscribe. They waited patiently for what seemed like a very long time. Finally, the door opened just enough to show a long nose and a pair of sleepy, blinking eyes. "Who is disturbing me on such a night? Speak up," said a gruff and suspicious voice. "Oh, Badger," cried Rat, "let us in, please. It's me, Rat, and my friend Mole, and we've lost our way in the snow." "Why, Ratty!" exclaimed Badger in a very different voice. "Come in, both of you. Well, I never. Lost in the snow, and in the wild wood, too, at this time of night. Come in." The Badger wore a bathrobe and slippers, and he was carrying a candlestick in his paw. He had probably been on his way to bed when they knocked. He patted both their heads. "This is not the sort of night for small animals to be out," he said. "Come into the kitchen. There's a fire there." Badger shuffled on in front of Rat and Mole, carrying the light. They followed him down a long, gloomy passage until they found themselves in a large, warm kitchen. There was a red brick floor and a big fireplace with two high-back benches on either side. In the middle of the room was a long table with benches to sit on and an armchair at one end. There were rows of plates on the shelves, and from the rafters overhead hung hams, bundles of dried herbs, onions, and baskets of eggs. It was a cozy, welcoming place. Badger sat them down on a bench to warm themselves at the fire and told them to take off their wet coats and boots. Then he brought them bathrobes and slippers, and he cleaned Mole's cut with warm water and bandaged it nicely. Soon Mole and Rat were so warm and content that the wild wood felt miles and miles away. When they were completely warm, Badger told them it was time for supper. He had brought out all kinds of delicious food, and they ate and ate, telling Badger the whole story of how they had come to his door. Badger sat in his armchair and listened and never once said, "I told you so." Mole began to feel very friendly toward him. After supper, the three of them sat around the fire again and talked more. "Now then," Badger said, "what's the news from your part of the world? How's old Toad?" "Oh, from bad to worse," said Rat. "Another bad smash-up last week. He's a terrible driver." "How many has he had?" asked Badger gloomily. "Smashes or machines?" asked Rat. "Oh, well, after all, it's the same thing with Toad. This is the 7th. "He's been in the hospital 3 times, put in Mole. "Badger," said Rat, "we're his friends. Shouldn't we do something?" Badger thought hard. "Of course, you know, I can't do anything now," he said finally. His friends understood. No animal is expected to do anything difficult during winter. Everybody knows winter is a time for resting. "But when spring comes," continued Badger, "we'll teach him a lesson." You're asleep, Rat." "Not me," said Rat, waking up with a jerk. "He's been asleep 2 or 3 times since supper," said Mole, laughing. He himself was feeling wide awake, though. He didn't know why. The reason, of course, was that he had grown up living underground like Badger, so he felt at home in Badger's house. Rat was used to the breezy river, and being underground made him feel sleepy. "Well, it's time for bed," said Badger. "Come along, you two. I'll show you to your room." He took them to a long room that was half bedroom and half barn. Badger's winter supplies took up half the room: piles of apples, turnips, and potatoes, baskets full of nuts, and jars of honey. There were also 2 little white beds that looked soft and inviting. Mole and Rat jumped right in and fell asleep. They slept late, and when they came down to breakfast the next morning, they found 2 young hedgehogs sitting on a bench at the table, eating oatmeal out of wooden bowls. The hedgehogs dropped their spoons, rose to their feet, and ducked their heads respectfully when Mole and Rat came in. Sit down," said Rat pleasantly, "and finish your oatmeal. Where did you come from? Did you lose your way in the snow?" "Yes, sir," said the older of the 2 hedgehogs. Me and little Billy here, we was trying to find our way to school, and of course we lost ourselves, sir, and Billy got frightened. And at last we found Mr. Badger's back door and decided to knock, sir, for Mr. Badger is a kind-hearted gentleman, as everyone knows." "I understand," said Rat. He and Mole began to help themselves to bacon and eggs. "And what's the weather like outside? You don't have to sir me quite so much," he added. "Oh, very bad, sir. The snow is very deep," said the Hedgehog. "You won't get out today." "Where's Mr. Badger?" asked Mole. "He's in his study, sir," replied the Hedgehog, "and he said he was going to be very busy this morning and he shouldn't be disturbed." Everybody knew what that meant. Badger was taking a nap. The doorbell rang, and Rat sent Billy, the smaller hedgehog, to see who it was. There was some stomping in the hall. Then Billy came back with Otter, who threw his arms around Rat. "Thought I might find you here," said Otter cheerfully. "They were all worried about you along the riverbank this morning, but I knew that when people were in trouble, they usually went to Badger, so I came straight here, through the wild wood and the snow. It was beautiful coming through the snow as the red sun was rising against the black tree trunks. I could have played in the snow all morning." "Weren't you at all nervous?" asked Mole. "Nervous?" Otter showed a gleaming set of strong white teeth as he laughed. "Ha ha ha! Not me! Now, how about some breakfast? I'm starving." Otter had just finished one plateful of eggs and bacon and was about to have some more when Badger came in, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "It must be almost lunchtime," he said to Otter. "Better stay and eat with us. You must be hungry this cold morning." "Oh, yes," replied Otter, winking at Mole. "The sight of these greedy young hedgehogs stuffing themselves makes me feel positively famished." The hedgehogs, who were just beginning to feel hungry again after their oatmeal, looked timidly at Mr. Badger, but were too shy to say anything. "Here, you two youngsters, be off home to your mother," said Badger kindly. The rest of them sat down to lunch together. Mole found himself next to Mr. Badger, and since the other two were talking about river news, he decided to tell Badger how at home he felt. "Once you're underground," Mole said, "you know exactly where you are. Nothing can happen to you. You're the boss, and when you want to, up you go." Badger smiled. "That's exactly what I say," he replied. "There's no real peace or happiness except underground, and if you want to expand, why, a dig and a scrape, and there you are. If you decide your house is too big, you stop up a hole or two, and there you are again. And there's no weather. Look at Rat. A couple of feet of flood water, and he has to move. Take Toad. Toad Hall is the best house in these parts. But what if fire breaks out? Where's Toad? Nope. Up and outside is good for some things, but underground, that's my idea of home." Mole agreed, and Badger got very friendly with him. "When lunch is over," he said, "I'll take you all around this little place of mine. I can see you'll appreciate it." After lunch, when the other two had settled themselves near the fire for a long talk on the subject of eels, Badger lit a lantern and told Mole to follow him. He gave him a complete tour of the main tunnels. Mole was very impressed. When they got back to the kitchen, they found Rat pacing restlessly. Being underground was getting on his nerves, and he was eager to get back to his river. He already had his overcoat on. "Come on, Mole," he said as soon as he saw them. "We have to leave while it's daylight. Don't want to spend another night in the wild wood." "It'll be all right," said Otter. "I'm coming along with you, and I know every path with my eyes closed. I'll take care of you." "You don't have to worry, Ratty," added Badger. "My passages run farther than you think, including some secret ones. You can leave by one of my shortcuts." Rat was ready to go, so Badger led the way along a damp tunnel that twisted and turned for what seemed like miles. At last, they saw daylight ahead. Badger said a quick goodbye and pushed them through the opening. Then he rearranged the vines and leaves that covered his secret hole and turned back. Rat and Mole and Otter found themselves standing at the very edge of the wild wood. In front of them was a wide open field, and far off they could see the river shining in the last light of the day. Otter led them across the snowy field. Mole glanced back once at the wild wood, and seeing its dark shadows made him even more sure that he was happy to live where he did, in the fields and meadows that weren't quite so wild. He was happy to have met Badger, and he would always remember his adventure in the wildwood. But right then, he could hardly wait to get back to Rat's cozy house. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now. We'll read chapter 5 next time. Love you guys. Bye-bye.